Here is a satellite picture of the far coast from the year 2000. And here we can see the same area again in 2007, with quadrilla's sites at Grange Road, Prees Hall, Preston New Road and Anna's Road, all marked on the map. The red line represents a fault line that can be found 20 to 30 metres below the superficial deposits at the surface. It has been outlined by Quadrilla in one of their core documents, as well as several professors. You can trace this fault line as a low-lying area on a topographical map that runs from north to south. So, considering we have Preston New Road as a title, why are we talking about Prees Hall? In 2011, Quadrilla came to Lancashire and drilled a well at Prees Hall. During the operations there, they caused 50-something, depending on who you talk to, minor earth tremors very close to the well. They also managed to induce a magnitude 2.3 earthquake not very far up to the north, which could be felt as far away allegedly as Manchester. A report was commissioned into the cause of this, and the findings suggest that the majority of the seismic events were caused when the well was shut in. That means after they put the chemicals down into the well under pressure, they then hold the chemicals down under pressure and give the sand and the water a chance to prop open the cracks and a chance for the cracks to grow so there can be longer cracks and more gas can flow. During the shut-in period, some of the water, they have said, found its way into the fault line nearby and caused lubrication of the fault line, which then caused the earthquake. We have spoken to local residents who've had their properties damaged by the earthquake. Despite the fact the earthquake damaged the well, Quadrilla decided they were still going to continue operations. That's not all that happened. As we look through 2011 satellite imagery of the area, we can see odd occurrences, such as this deep red seen above where the small earth tremors were recorded during the time Quadrilla were in operation at Prees Hall. This continues downhill as we go southwest along the fault line. The pattern can be seen crossing a dike, under a main road, and continuing to this area here we know as Wake Park. This field is just metres above the water table, and there's a pattern here in the way that the land is opened up and the water is flowing. This field used to be stable farmland, and while it has experienced water issues in the past, it's only after the earthquake in 2011 that we see real issues appear. The same deep colour red sediment can be seen also on the other side of the motorway. It almost looks as if the grass in this area has suffered. Professor Smythe puts the fault line 20 to 30 metres below the surface and anywhere up to 100 metres either side of the red line. At the end of the fault line we come to Anna's Road, where Quadrilla drilled in 2012. It's only in 2011 when we see these swirly lines of dark sediment appear around the landscape. These red lines represent a pattern of subsurface water flow and fluvial processes. It exactly fits the low-lying topology of the moss. So, going back to Prees Hall now, and in 2011 we had the very deep red. In 2012 there was a purple sediment in the field. By 2015 the field looked pretty normal, but the surrounding areas did have issues. In July 2017 it looks dry. This is September, and as you can see it looks anything but dry now. And here we are again in May 2018, and the area has deteriorated further. Also where the pad used to be, we can see discoloration, what looks like dead vegetation, and also some phenomena which we've seen elsewhere, but we'll come back to that later. Now I'd like to draw your attention to this dark area close to the pad. In 2000 it's only water, part of a field. In 2002 it's still fallow. In 2007 the field has been successfully ploughed. However, in 2011 this dark, deep area appears on the surface. In 2012 the area has now spread and has become green, and in 2015 the green goes and it's just a body of water. In 2017 the area has been contained, but it's still fallow. And now you can see in March 2018 The area is no longer contained, and very close by, damage is appearing on the surface. Breeze Hall was not the only place to experience damage on the land after the earthquake in 2011. This area is called Hardhorn. Between 2011 and 2012, some interesting things happened to the land here. For example, this spring. Here we can see it in the early years, looking like a very pristine field. In 2011, some surface damage appears, and in 2012 another spring, like the one before, has appeared, and this is also green. By 2017, the spring has gone again. The land around Hardhorn is interesting, however it's not the only place on the Fylde coast to experience issues after the earthquake. This is Google Earth satellite imagery from 2012, and as we take a look around the Fylde coast, we can see various different places where the same dark blue and slightly iridescent water can be seen on the surface in areas where it has not been seen previously. Interestingly, since Quadrilla came to Preston New Road and punctured the Artesian Aquifer in June 2017, we have seen red sediment staining appearing in these same locations and staining the grass and other vegetation red. These issues appear time and time again near cracks and fissures which were not present until the earthquake in 2011. The iridescence we are seeing may indicate the presence of a bacterial bloom, or it may be a result of hydrocarbons. In any case, the widespread appearance of water on the surface with iridescence and other nearby phenomena only occurs in 2012. While on its own this is not proof of anything in particular, this may be an indication that damage has been sustained to the superficial deposit structure in the area. In some areas we can see a similar sediment staining as we could see at Breeze Hall further downhill in 2012. Along with other phenomena which were previously unseen in these locations. Before we move on to the pad, I'd like to introduce you to these low-lying fields. This is downhill from the pad by about 1 kilometre. Again, we can see another area that's been left fallow in the past. In 2011 again we see another instance where the land changes. By 2017 a spring has been established in this field. Just to give you an idea of the location, this is south by southeast of the pad and north by northeast of Anna's Road by about 1.5 kilometres. If you're wondering what the orange lines represent, keep watching. Here we see the field in September.
Here they come, twilight times. Prepare yourself.
Here is the same field again in November. Notice how things have changed.
Let dark light ease the impact. And take the leap.
This new crack that's appeared in the ground terminates at the spring. And the vegetation surrounding the spring has gone quite dark. Here we are again in December now. The crack that we saw previously has now changed, and we can also see various size of holes that have appeared in the ground around the spring. Only 9 days later, the number of holes have increased and they appear to be following a crack-like pattern. And now we come to 2018. As you can see, this pattern of damage has now spread to the road and the power pylon just here. These phenomena extend not only to the spring, but also down the side of the crack that appeared in November. They run throughout this field all the way to a body of water which used to be in the bulrushes, which have now died and gone brown, and the water is just next to where it used to be. And just slightly to the north we see more phenomena which continue to follow the crack-like pattern. Some of them are the size of sheep. Now in March, and we can see how the phenomena have progressed. Not only at the spring, but also at the road, where now some seem to go underneath. And we'll just leave you with this little comparison now between January and March, but we will return to the phenomena by the end of this documentary. Moving on to Preston New Road now. In pre-fracking years, the fields were highly productive with very little damage. After the earthquake, that starts to change. Water appears in the fields here in 2012. The land is settled by 2015. But then quadrilla returned to the Fylde coast in 2017. The pad sits on a deposit of glacial till. That's the blue area which you can see here. When we overlay the topographical map of the area, you can see that the pad is on a shelf. But what exactly is glacial till? This is an example of how a glacial till is formed. We start before the last ice age with bedrock. As the glacier spreads out, it scours the rock surface and quarries, and pushes and plucks chunks of bedrock which is mixed into the ice, making the glacier's lode. Where roughness in the terrain slows or stops the flow, the ice current slides up over the blocked ice on innumerable shear planes. Shearing thoroughly mixes the load. As the glacier spreads, long cracks called crevices open parallel to the direction of the ice flow. The glacier melts as it flows forward, and its meltwater erodes the terrain in front of the ice. Meltwater washes away some of the load freed by the ice and deposits it on the outwash plain. As the climate begins to warm, the glacier starts to melt. As the top of the glacier melts, some of the sediment that's mixed into the ice accumulates on top of the glacier. Some is carried away by meltwater onto the sloping ice front and out to the plain beyond. Some of the debris slips down the ice front and in a mud flow. Meltwater runs through the ice in a crevasse, and a superglacial stream drains the top of the ice, forming an outwash fan. Here, all but the top of a block of ice is buried by outwash. As the climate warms further, the whole ice sheet melts, and glaciation ends. The end moraine is a low broad ridge which is left between the outwash plain and the till plains. Runoff from rain cuts stream valleys into its slopes. A stream flows through the end moraine along the channel cut by the meltwater that ran out of the crevasse in the glacier. The collapse of outwash into the cavity left when the ice block melted has now formed a kettle, a hill of outwash left where the glacier has dumped sand and gravel into a crevasse or other depression in the glacier, or at its edge is called a kame. Hopefully that information will allow you to better see what's going on here at Preston New Road. It occurs to me that the pad at Preston New Road is on an outwash plain. Work on the site begins in February 2017 and the ecocide has just begun. The company starts clearing the topsoil in order to make way for the pad. You can see standing water in this field even now. Ten days later, and quadrilla have unearthed what looks like a small lake. You can see runoff in the fields here and the direction of the water flow. Notice how green the grass is in the surrounding landscape, and also where water is already pooling. This will give you some idea of the sheer size of the pad. Heading west now, we're going in the direction that they're drilling. And down the bottom here is the 1 kilometre terminus where they say they're going to frack to. Two weeks later and quadrilla are still struggling with this lake that they unearthed. However, they are doing their best to dry it up. They are laying a lime substrate beneath where they're going to lay the pad, in the hope this will solidify the land enough for them to have a pad and all the heavy machinery that goes with it on top. We know that this area is glacial till and we know how it's formed. Glacial till is made of very small fine particles such as clay, mainly, and it is not a very stable form of sediment. And now at the end of March we can see that the lake that quadrilla were working on has almost disappeared. However, there is a dark patch of dampness in the area where the lake was before. And remember where that is because we will be seeing it again. You can also see the fences going up now and the drainage channel around the site is starting to take shape. Nearly a month later now, and the cellar for the rig has been excavated. On top of our lake we can see the beginnings of the pad being laid, the so-called impermeable membrane and two protective layers either side, with aggregate laid on the top. This is all the pad is made of. We're in May now, and the cellar of the pad has been set. The pad is nearly 3/4 laid, though the colour of the soil being quite brown suggests that rain has fallen on the lime, may have washed some of that lime away, which means that the foundations may not be as structurally sound as first anticipated. As the pad is completed, we see wet patches forming on the subsurface. Where the lake was, we can see dark soil on the northwest side of the pad, and an area of sodden ground at one of the many joins. We can see an access line into the pad. The pipe here was purple, though it enters the pad at the concrete sump, where they now want to treat water to expel it into the brook. One might consider this was the plan all along. Towards the end of May, the pad is nearly complete. The fields along the fault line are shown here, and you can see they are green and dry. In the distance now we can see the fields towards Anna's Road past the substation. In June, the pad appears to have a water issue on the northwest side, causing the soil to ripple. This footage was taken 4 days after the company reported hitting artesian water. Artesian aquifers are confined aquifers that are fed from rain falling on the hills above and finding its way into a layer of rock with high permeability in between two layers of low permeability. The well was drained and casing added. Quadrilla continued as though nothing had happened. By July, water could be seen pooling at the edge of the pad, and pools of water forming on the pad itself. These follow a pattern from southeast to northwest. Quadrilla blame the weight of the trucks displacing the aggregate. We have witnessed water ingressing on the southeast side and egressing where the lake was on the northwest side, which suggests the pad is becoming undermined by a pre-existing water flow through the location. The current rig is assembled throughout the first half of August. A sound barrier is erected. and the well was connected on the 17th, and chemical tanks installed. The grass where the equipment was stored in the construction of the pad has grown back. The ingress is now visible and red water can be seen pooling at the base of the rig. The red colour is caused by the mudstone that the company is drilling into. An unusual line appears at the surface between two ponds. This may be a result of land movement. Open skips are being used for well operations, which the operator had been told not to do in a compliance report from the EA on the 1st of August. The ingress was also reported to the Environment Agency, who claimed they could not find it. At the end of August, heavy rainfall exacerbated the water situation. Showing flooding on the pad. This was also seen at the side of the pad where the lake used to be. The next day, this red sediment was also seen in the brook downhill from the pad, in the main drain, and in various other places. Not to mention, several ponds also change around this time too. We can see red on the pad throughout September, and the ground around the pads begins to change with depressions and excess water. The ingress we call water issue 2, and it shows signs of contamination at a certain point. The fence also begins to peel away from the foundations. A storage tanker is seen to leak on the pad several times. One area where they were working on the side of the pad in the early days starts to subside, and we call this water issue number 3. So now we move on to another phenomenon noticed in at least 2k radius surrounding the pad. You may recall the red that was seen at the edge of the pad at the end of August after rain. This discoloration continues into the brook and the main drain as we saw previously. However, many of the ponds in the area also show a strange phenomena around the same time, with many turning iridescent in a rainbow sheen, or displaying discoloration of a different nature. It has been suggested that these are the colours of the groundwater in this area finding their way to the surface. At this particular pond we call Fish Pond, the algae that's living here gets driven out to the edge, and when the water recedes the algae has nowhere to go, and so subsequently dies. This discoloration is quite widespread and travels over time. Much of this surface water all changing colour at the same time in locations where it is quite likely connected to the groundwater. The difference between groundwater and surface water is as it suggests. Surface water sits at the surface and groundwater travels through the ground. The water table in this region is quite high, and many springs have existed here for hundreds of years. We also see many plants taking up this red colour, only in certain patches though. This travels and dies away as time progresses. Many of these water issues only appear after drilling begins, and they're in sync with each other. What goes wrong at one place goes wrong ultimately somewhere else. Interestingly, many of these issues occur around the pad within 2 kilometres, or along the fault line which we spoke about earlier. We see this same red bubbling up time and time again all around the fault line. The Mercia mudstone group that Quadrilla are drilling through has a red colour. Red is indicative of iron. Later the red seems to leave these areas and the plants turn white. The iridescence you can see has been reported to the Environment Agency on numerous occasions. However, unfortunately, they failed to attend or have failed to take samples each and every time. We have records of correspondence with the Environment Agency where they claim that the iridescence you're seeing here is simply clouds. The exact details of all the water issues are beyond the scope for this particular documentary. What we are showing you here is simply an overview of how widespread these issues have been, and that they all have a correlation in particular ways. And now we come to the final part of this documentary. The phenomena that we saw at Prees Hall and also at Balham Road were first noticed in the low-lying areas of Wake Park and Balham in September. Here they appear to begin quite small. As we see, they don't stay small for long, with the appearance of a crack-like pattern and eruptions the size of sheep. Instead of trying to go through every single area individually, which is beyond the scope of this documentary, we will just run through the locations where they have been spotted before, during, and later. As you may remember from earlier, this is Prees Hall. Following the fault line to the southwest, we see along the train line and near this body of water, these phenomena start to appear and spread. The water at this location does seem to change over time also, much like the other areas we've looked at. Over to the Wake Park area now. This patch of land here turns quite red and into a lake. And as time goes on, you see the field begin to change. A crack-like pattern appears nearby in the holes, and the grass also dies, as well as trees falling down. In this next field now, we can see in the early days there was hardly any damage. Phenomena appear and spread. At one point we found a dead sheep. And as the phenomena progress, we see the surrounding fields change in their elevation. These issues do extend somewhat to the northwest. These are the fields directly below Wake Park. Where the phenomena appear, water appears soon after. This field is directly above the fault line outlined by David Smythe. This slip appears before the drilling actually begins and may be a result of the earlier earthquakes. The phenomena appear here prior to the land surrounding it appearing to slip. And the water at the pond nearby becoming more pervasive. We can see a couple of springs here, and there are several locations where the phenomena join with the motorway, and some of them even carry on to the other side. We're on the other side of the motorway now, and we can see the land around this telegraph pole begins to change. And eventually looks as if it's falling into the stream. This field is particularly interesting. Starting off as undulating and green, we soon see a depression form that becomes very boggy. And while it looks like an animal path, it may also not be. These phenomena appear here too, and over time they change in appearance. The phenomena carry on the other side of Car Bridge now, near the bus stop, along Preston New Road, and out towards Balham, where we can see many new water features and flooding appearing on the landscape, as well as discoloured water. The phenomena stretch out past Balham Road, and they head out towards Lytham, all along the low-lying stress point downhill from the rig. While downhill from the rig we see these eruptions from the ground, or phenomena. On the uphill side of the rig we are seeing sinkholes. Some have been seen by farmers already. And some are close by to properties. Some may have yet gone unnoticed, while others still are connected to or very close by phenomena we have seen in the water and the discoloration sediment in the grass. And further still, some old sinkholes in areas prone because of the previous uses of the land have also altered and changed. This documentary does not seek to go into any one particular issue too much. It's here as an overview of what we have noticed and witnessed on the land surrounding the pad and on the pad. From speaking to experts, we have several theories of what might be occurring here. One such theory, which may explain the various phenomena we are seeing, is that the artesian aquifer, after being punctured, has now ruptured in various places, leading to an increase in surface and groundwater and causing the phenomena we are seeing and the sinkholes via processes of erosion, deposition and liquefaction. However, this is only superficial evidence, excuse the pun, and what we require now is for landowners, property owners and any locals who witness or notice anything strange happening in their location to report that to DEFRA, to your local council, and potentially, if there's any pollution in the area, to also report this to the Environment Agency. If any livestock owners are experiencing unexpected deaths or an increased number of deaths, this should be investigated with an autopsy, just to be on the safe side for everybody's safety. If indeed there is liquefaction in the area, an earthquake could cause major subsidence to property and infrastructure. These issues are quite urgent, and we have tried contacting the Environment Agency to show them this in person. While they may be busy, or even understaffed or underfunded, the consequences if this is not investigated may be quite dire, which is why we are asking for a full, independent review of the situation by competent professionals. To find out more about fracking or extreme energy extraction, visit FrackOff, search for groups in your area, or explore some of the links in the description of this video.